Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. About 2 months ago, Brother Polight made some controversial comments about the black community. And I want to play this audio from that hangout. And also I'm going to play audio from another video that he did where he was trying to clarify his remarks. The original videos are no longer up. I think he either took them down or put them on private. So I'll post a link to another video that basically recorded his past hangout. So check this out, and then I'll provide my commentary on the other side.
Now I'm out. Now I'm saying, yo, yeah, we animals in that motherfucker. They got us in projects and small spaces, lacking in resources, low income. We gonna bang on each other. We gonna sell drugs. We gonna prostitute. It's not something to be fucking proud of. We should condemn that shit and wake people up to the fact you shouldn't have to know it's garbage day just because the trucks have to come outside. I don't want to fucking seeing bars on my motherfucking window. It's not healthy. You niggas is living in this shit and you done got so used to it, I sound like I'm speaking a fucking foreign language. I don't like it. It drives me fucking nuts to live like that, and I don't want my children subject to that bullshit. There was a juvenile detention facility created just 7 blocks from where I lived in Brownsville, and I wound up being in that motherfucker. I can't stand that fucking neighborhood, and I can't stand neighborhoods like it, and the motherfuckers in there that perpetuate the energy for niggas to get stuck in it. Fuck that shit. Fuck the ghetto. Fuck the hood, and fuck the animals that live in that motherfucker. And if you feel like I'm talking to all black people, fuck you too. Because I know damn well I ain't talking about all black people. That shit is disgraceful, man. It's deplorable, destitute, dilapidated conditions. Let's call it what it is. How many times I have to say, I'm not calling the whole race animals, nor everybody that has less money or in the lower income community animals. I never said that. I keep saying I never said that, but people keep doing these streams. Animals, well, how those animals saved you? Those animals, what are you talking about? I'm talking about people who conduct domestic violence, men who beat their women, men who molesting their children or other people's children, men who are selling drugs that are destroying us from the inside out and not even giving the women that's conceiving an opportunity to give birth to children that go uncompromised. Men that are killing each other senselessly for frivolous reasons. That's what I'm talking about. Those are animals. People who are making more babies than they can afford. Like they don't have bills, because animals don't have bills. Animals don't have bills. So they make and produce the multitude, void of worrying about bills. And in some instances, animal would be a compliment, considering what some of our people do to each other. These are facts. These are absolute facts.
So you heard the video, and you heard Brother Polight trying to explain away his controversial comments about the black community. He tried to say, well, he wasn't referring to all African Americans as animals. He was only talking about criminals. However, that clarification is inadequate because this man basically said F the ghetto. So when he's saying F the ghetto, that doesn't just include the criminals. That includes the ordinary, hardworking people who are struggling and living day by day in the ghetto. And I think that those comments are utterly disrespectful. They are insulting. They are demeaning. And one would expect much better from someone who claims to be about consciousness, someone who claims to be about the black community. You would expect him to show more respect to the black community than that. You would expect him to have more regard and more love and more compassion for the urban communities, the black communities, than that. Especially since it was the black community that made this man. The black community supported this man. The black community gave him the platform that he would use to become successful. So I think that it is disrespectful, and by making those comments, he is essentially biting the hand that literally feeds him. Now, after making these disrespectful comments saying F the ghetto and F the animals that live there, this man actually expects that same community to come out and support him now. He expects that same community to finance his legal expenses, to finance his projects in the community. He expects that same community that he showed no regard for, that he basically said F that community and F the animals that live there. He actually expects those people to support him now. And this just reminds me of some other comments that another person made. You have Dr. Umar Johnson, who basically called the black community trifling because they didn't give him enough money. And these types of comments, these types of disrespectful comments, remind me of some of these money-hungry pastors in the black community. People like Creflo Dollar, a man who talked about shooting people who didn't pay their tithes, a man who begged his congregation and his supporters to help pay for him to get a jet, and then criticized people that had the nerve to speak out against that. That's what the statements of Brother Polight and Dr. Umar Johnson remind me of. That's what they remind me of. And I really think that it is a shame that this man who has turned his back on the black community by saying F the ghetto and F the animals that live there, he actually expects that same community to support him. And to get support, what this man is doing is basically running a guilt trip on black people. You know, he had somebody on one of his live streams basically saying that the only reason why black people are not supporting him is because they're cowards. Basically trying to guilt trip people into support him. Trying to exercise like mind control over people. That's essentially what it is. And this whole thing about attacking the people who live in the ghetto and saying F the ghetto and F the animals who lives there, it shows an actual disgust for the community. It shows contempt for the community. And as someone who is supposed to be a community activist, someone who is supposed to be concerned about the plight of his people, one should express some kind of love for the community. One should express some kind of respect for the community. One should express some kind of compassion for the community instead of attacking the community, instead of attacking the people that live in the community. During this hangout, Sarnetta made some great points about how here you have Brother Polight condemning the criminal behavior in the community when Brother Polight was one of the very animals that he is now complaining about. Brother Polight admits to being a past member of a gang in New York City. He admits to being involved in the gang lifestyle and all that and everything that comes along with it. He was literally one of the animals that he's now complaining about. But now that he has moved out of the hood, moved on to the big house, basically, like in the Jefferson, moving on up. Now that he is moving on up, he is forgetting about where he came from. He is disrespecting where he came from. Instead of like still having hope for the people in these struggling communities, this man has essentially turned his back on those communities. If somebody like Brother Polight could emerge from a harsh environment like these ghetto communities then why can't other people emerge from those communities? Why not hold out hope for others and guide others and inspire others instead of condemning and criticizing the community? As Sarnetta pointed out, Malcolm X was one of those animals that you're criticizing. But somebody took time to educate that brother. Somebody took time to enlighten that brother. And he went on to become one of the greatest leaders in African American and world history. There's great untapped potential in these so-called ghettos that is not being tapped into, that needs to be unleashed, that needs to be nurtured and protected instead of condemned and attacked. Just as you were able to manage to change your life around, there are plenty of other people in these struggling communities that can also change their life around with the right type of guidance and mentorship. So I think that it is just disrespectful to attack the community instead of trying to reach out to the community and inspire people so that they can live a better life, a more productive life. And instead of attacking the people who live in the ghetto, instead of attacking the people who are engaged in the criminal activity, and I'm not condoning criminal activity, obviously. Crime must be addressed. People who commit crimes must be penalized and punished for their crimes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. But instead of just attacking the community, saying F the community and calling people animals, why not address the conditions that created the people you call animals? Why not address the poverty in the community? Why not address the unemployment in the community? Why not address the failing schools in the community? Why not address the mass incarceration in the community? Address the war on drugs in the community? Why not address those problems instead of going the coward route and attacking the victims of the conditions in the community? The community, these ghetto communities that you're talking about, they are toxic environments. They're toxic because of those conditions, because of the lack of opportunity, because of the failing schools, because of the lack of jobs. It creates a toxic environment. And then when you infuse drugs and guns, you create an explosive situation. You create conditions that generate crime. Instead of dealing with the main root causes of the problem, you just want to attack the people who, in the big scheme of things, are merely the victim. That is put in a toxic environment. That environment is going to have an impact on you. If you put a fish in a dirty, filthy pond, that fish is going to absorb the filth and the scum of that environment. And what we need to do is change that environment, clean that environment, detox that environment, instead of attacking the people who are in that environment. But see, that's the heavy lifting. That's the work that must be done. That's the real work that needs to be done. Instead of all these ridiculous and silly and egotistical debates about ancient Egypt nonsense that is completely irrelevant to the plight of our people. Completely irrelevant. You have these people debating about some ancient, dusty Egyptian hieroglyphics that have no relevance in our modern day life, that don't affect the conditions that impact our communities, that impact these ghettos. It's easy to engage in these ridiculous debates. It's easy to fuss with brothers and sisters over ridiculous debates. It is much more difficult to change the conditions in our community, change the conditions by all means that are available to us. That's the real work. That's what people need to be doing instead of condemning from afar. Instead of leaving and running away from the community, we need to tackle the conditions that exist in the community. That's what we need to do. Everybody can't afford to just leave these urban communities. And leaving the community is not the solution to the problems that exist in our community. It's simply not. Now, I'm not saying that somebody should live in an impoverished community and just stay there for the sake of staying there, for the sake of being down with the community. That's not what I'm saying at all. I realize that there are some areas that are so in disrepair, so dilapidated, so destroyed, that it would take generations to improve those communities. And I understand that families cannot afford to wait around while those conditions appear to be getting worse and worse. They can't afford to live in communities like in parts of Chicago where you have 12 people shot over the holiday weekend, shot and killed over the holiday weekend. People can't afford to wait that out. So I understand people wanting to live in more prosperous and affluent communities away from the problems that plague the inner cities. I understand that. And like Sarnetta said, I don't condemn people simply because they move outside of the ghetto or anything like that. But when you move outside of the ghetto and then you turn your back on the people that made you, when you crap all over the people that made you, when you disrespect the people that made you, that's the problem that I have. That's when I have a problem. And, the second thing is this. I mean, people have this idea that moving to white areas is an answer. That somehow these people, these white people, are so much more important and so much more valuable, and that their neighborhoods are so much better and everything like that. We had this false notion that these white people are so superior, that their neighborhoods are superior, that everything about them is superior. And that's not the case. I mean, there are plenty of prosperous African American neighborhoods that people can live in. If you're really about being so-called pro-black, there are plenty of prosperous black neighborhoods for people to live in. There are affluent neighborhoods here in Baltimore. There are affluent neighborhoods in Prince George's County, Maryland. And there are plenty of affluent black neighborhoods all over this country, especially in places like New York. So you don't have to run to the white man in order to have a safe and prosperous life for your family. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have. And I really think that it is a major contradiction for someone to be talking all this black nationalism rhetoric while they are literally living white. They talk about separation, but they are literally living with the white people. While they preach to you and me about self-reliance and black nationalism and all that kind of stuff and separation, here they are living with the very white people that they have condemned. And that's hypocrisy. And I just want to go back to my point about how moving to these white neighborhoods is not an answer to the problems that our people face. When people move to these predominantly white areas, it's a new environment, and with that new environment comes new problems. You can have your kids in these predominantly white schools, and then you have to deal with other issues. You have to deal with the issues of discrimination within those schools, the issues of teachers treating African American students differently than the white students in terms of tracking them um, into slower paced classes, not giving them honor classes. You have to deal with the issue of disparate disciplinary practices where African Americans are targeted for more harsh discipline than white students. You have to deal with the school to prison pipeline issues. And you have to deal with this whole notion of Eurocentrism in these affluent white communities in terms of them teaching these Eurocentric values. And it just goes back to something that Malcolm X said. I mean, he said, only a fool will let his enemy educate his children. And that's what people have become. They have become like fools, thinking their kids are getting something better by being educated by these white people. And then also with these affluent white neighborhoods, you have to deal with the problem of racial profiling in your own neighborhood, where people assume that you don't belong in that neighborhood because you're African American. We all remember the situation of Henry Louis Gates when he was trying to get in his own home, and the police thought he was breaking into his home, and they arrested that brother. They harassed that brother. There are plenty of cases, like the situation involving Trayvon Martin. Here he is walking from the store going to his father's house, but because he's in a certain neighborhood, people assume that he doesn't belong here, that he doesn't belong there. That's what they assume. And here you have Brother Polight, who went out there to Hollywood. Now he's complaining and crying about being roughed up by the police. So with these new environments come new problems. And I just want to briefly go back to this issue of the ghetto and, just the conditions. Rapper Immortal Technique basically said how there's nothing black about the ghetto or poverty. Poverty is not anything that people should be proud of. It's not something that's naturally equated with blackness. These ghetto communities that we see, they are not organic. Like a while ago, I had a discussion at a civil rights conference, and they dealt with this whole issue of how these ghettos were created. These ghettos and these projects are segregated by design. You have black people concentrated in these poor urban communities by design. These ghettos are products of oppression. The fact that you have these concentrated communities that are plagued with poverty and violence and all these other ill conditions is by design. And again, that goes back to my original point about how those conditions have to be addressed. Because it's not the physical land that's the issue. It's the conditions that go along with it. The failing schools, the poverty, the unemployment, the hopelessness, the drugs, and the guns. That's the problem. Because often what happens is they push out. In many areas, you have gentrification where poor people are pushed out of these communities, and you have these yuppies, these white, upperly mobile people come in. And with those people come all kinds of resources and businesses and all that kind of stuff. They try to improve the resources, the transportation system. They improve everything to make the environment habitable and comfortable for these upwardly mobile white people because of policies. That's what they do. Why can't we work hard enough to demand those types of resources in our communities now without gentrification? That's what we need to be doing. That's what we need to do. So those are my thoughts about this issue. Tell me what you think about this. You know, I just think that it is a disgrace that you have this man who has no respect for the black community, at least according to these statements. These statements are evidence that this man feels like he is better than this community that made him. It shows that he has no respect for this community. And yet this man has the audacity to ask that very community for money and for support. And I think people like this need to be called out on this BS. You know, later for all this fake unity for the sake of unity, all leaders, all people of position need to be held accountable. If you don't hold these people accountable, they are able to exploit the people. They are able to exploit the community, and they are able to get away with committing all kinds of violations on the community. They are able to get away with not producing any kind of concrete results for the community that they are leading. Leaders like this have to be held accountable, and they eventually need to be replaced with better, more qualified, and more committed leadership. We need leaders who are not about trying to fill their pockets at the expense of the people. We need leaders who are selfless, leaders who love the people with all their heart, who are willing to fight for the people and die for the people. That's what we need. So tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.